to present this afternoon. We will also be having a hearing on July 6th, our only other scheduled hearing before the next bill deadline. And before we begin with our agenda, are there any comments from members? Seeing none, we'll move right along. We're going to start our meeting with a special order of business to hear SB 48 by Senator Leno. And I will set the time limit on Mr. Leno's bill, roughly 10 minutes for speakers to testify for SB 448 and 10 minutes in rebuttal or against the bill. So without any further announcements or comments, I think we will begin. Senator Leno, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Brownlee and committee members. It's a pleasure to be able to present our SB 48, which is the Fair Education Act, acronym for Fair, Accurate, Inclusive, and Respectful Education Act. Our education code currently requires that our curriculum include the role and contribution of a wide number of groups that are traditionally overlooked by the greater culture, including African Americans and Mexican Americans, Native Americans, European Americans. The list is long. This bill very simply will require that our curriculum also include the role and contributions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Americans, as well as persons with disabilities. The bill also will ensure that discriminatory bias and negative stereotypes based on sexual orientation are prohibited in school activities and instructional materials. There are many reasons to be doing this. I think it's very much in the context of an ever-growing tragic phenomenon of school bullying. We know that children are emotionally harassed, physically harassed, mentally harassed, and it gets so severe that we've seen any number of 12 and 13-year-olds go home and end their own lives, hang themselves from the cherry tree in their parents' backyard, put a gun to their head. We've seen this happen repeatedly. We do know for fact, from any number of studies and surveys done, that in school districts which already have this kind of inclusive curriculum, that rates of all types of bullying are decreased. That's a very interesting fact. So that mean-spirited rumors that are traditionally experienced in grade school and high school, they are decreased. And the kind of assaults on students who look different or are different in any way. And it's really my strongly held belief that we are denying our students valuable information. We appropriately, rightfully, include in our studies for school children the fact that there was an African-American man by the name of Dr. Martin Luther King who fought for everybody's civil rights and was assassinated for his efforts. But it's also an important fact of California history that there was a gay American man who fought for everyone's civil rights and was assassinated for his efforts. We are censoring our history currently. We want to lift that veil of censorship and teach our students the facts of California history. Harvey Milk in particular, in this instance, as the very first openly LGBT Californian to be elected to state office. That's a chapter in history. And it's also important because not only for the likely improved self-esteem and self-respect that LGBT students will experience coming to know their own history, their own community's history, and the fact that they are a part of a community which has been fighting for civil rights for many, many decades, if not centuries and millennia. They're a part of something. That's good for a student to know and realize. But it also benefits the straight students. We are at fault by denying this information to a 12-year-old sixth grader in Ventura County, I think in your part of the state, Chairwoman.
In my district.
Where this 12-year-old boy shot dead in his own sixth grade classroom a classmate who he perceived as being different. This other little boy was different because he had, as the assailant described to his teacher, effeminate features. He was too girly. What we are denying our students is the educational fact of the broad diversity of human experience. We come in all shapes, sizes, colors, types that are all God-given, if that's your persuasion. And we're all here to share the earth and figure out how to make a society of it all and make it work. So we have to take responsibility for kids who don't understand what these differences are. These differences aren't going away. So our choice is to keep them in the dark and to let them fight among themselves and to learn to dislike and distrust each other and grow up with all of that. Or we can better educate them, better socialize them, and I think have a much better future for all of us. So the bill is really pretty straightforward, and I would ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator. And as I said in the opening, we're going to sort of manage time here for 10 minutes in support of the bill and 10 minutes for the opposition.
I want to thank our co-sponsors, Equality California, and also the Gay Straight Alliance Network. And we have Mario Guerrero and Carolyn Laub from each of those organizations, our sponsors, here to speak among a few other folks. And we'll keep the whole presentation to 10 minutes. So got that, everyone? We're going to be respectful of the chairwoman's desire.
So first witness in support of Mr. Leno's bill.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Mario Guerrero here on behalf of Equality California. EQCA is a sponsor of SB 48, the Fair, Accurate, Inclusive, and Respectful Education Act, authored by Senator Mark Leno, and we, of course, thank the Senator for his leadership. SB 48 would simply add the contributions of LGBT people into instructional materials, much as we do for an existing list of underrepresented cultural and ethnic groups already covered under current law. The opposition has painted the Fair Education Act as a request for special treatment or special rights, which is blatantly false. This legislation simply calls for accurate, inclusive history to be taught in our schools. The negative views of an individual or a group on a particular minority, in this case the LGBT people, should not be the reason that an entire civil rights movement, in this case the LGBT civil rights movement, should be treated as non-existent. The opposition seems intent on describing the bill as a measure that would teach kids about sex, that hearing the word gay or lesbian is going to somehow make students gay or lesbian. Kids already hear the word gay and lesbian in their schools every single day. Some kids hear these words as they're being picked on and bullied. That's when they hear these words currently. The Fair Education Act does not introduce new subject matter. It simply introduces the subject matter in a respectful and accurate way. And studies have shown that inclusion of LGBT people in instructional materials is linked to greater student safety and lower rates of bullying. Additionally, the California Department of Education has a process that is used to adopt curriculum. The process includes teachers, professionals, and the public. LGBT inclusion would go through this same process, and it would be age appropriate. I hope that those who oppose this bill today do so in a respectful manner that does not malalign LGBT people by insulting that we are mentally ill, confused, or disrespect transgender people based on their gender identity or gender expression, as has been done in the past hearings. I respectfully ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next witness.
Good afternoon. My name is Carolyn Laub. I'm the Executive Director of Gay Straight Alliance Network, co-sponsor of the Fair Education Act. We represent well over 10,000 students who are members of Gay Straight Alliance clubs in 850 California middle schools and high schools across California. 70 of those students were here recently in the Capitol to support SB 48. Unfortunately, bullying of LGBT youth is a pervasive problem in our schools with consequences on students' mental health and academic achievement. GSA Network hears stories every day from students who are pushed and shoved and called names and spat upon or physically assaulted at school because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. And tragically, we've lost many youth to suicide after these young people have faced relentless bullying in their schools. If our schools included accurate depictions of LGBT Americans in classroom materials, our schools would teach all students to respect each other's differences, increasing all students' sense of belonging and ability to learn. Fair, inclusive lessons can make LGBT students feel less alone or isolated, improving their ability to learn, stay in school, and importantly, graduate. And the research could not be clearer. The California Safe Schools Coalition found that the most effective step that schools can implement that's correlated with increased student safety and reduced bullying is when students report that they've learned about LGBT people in the classroom. And some schools have already taken this step. Senator Leno referred to some of this research. In schools where the majority of students report that LGBT people are included in classroom discussions, only 11% of students report being bullied based on their sexual orientation or gender identity, but that number more than doubles to 24% if the majority of students in a school say they haven't learned about LGBT people in the classroom. No student deserves to be bullied. Our schools should promote an atmosphere of safety and respect for all students. Most instructional materials don't include any historical information about the LGBT movement or LGBT leaders and their significance to U.S. and state history. It's this lack of information that perpetuates the negative stereotypes of LGBT people and fuels bullying on our campuses. With the Fair Education Act, you have the opportunity to help all students get the education they deserve. I urge your aye vote on SB 48. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Good afternoon. My name is Isaiah Byseri. I'm a graduate of Glendora High School and freshman at UCLA this fall. As a gay young man, I struggled with accepting my identity for years. The world had taught me that gay people aren't successful. They haven't achieved great things like leading movements, inspiring minds, and making the world a better place overall. Or have they? I came out as a sophomore. I had known I was gay for about 5 years before doing so, but I struggled day in and day out because I was afraid I'd be stereotyped into the image of a typical gay male so often the media perpetuates. This stereotype, cruel and unjust, paved the way for years of bullying by my uneducated, misinformed classmates who found no reason not to pick on anyone who they perceived as gay. Little did I know I could follow in the footsteps of amazing individuals who also identified as gay and definitely did not fit the narrow stereotype I had known my whole life, the same stereotype that kept me miserable for years. I could follow in the footsteps of Harvey Milk, an amazing civil rights leader, or Bayard Rustin, an organizer of the Martin Luther King's March on Washington. Both of these individuals were gay, and both made enormous contributions to society that I had never heard of before in the classroom. With the Fair Education Act in place, I would have grown up knowing that I could be successful and proud of who I am. I would not have had to lie to the world and hide my identity, living each day wondering if I even belonged in a world where I didn't fit in. Where was my history when I needed it?
Thank you. Next witness.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Santosh Siram Santana with Asian Americans for Civil Rights and Equality. We're a joint partnership of 3 Asian American civil rights organizations. And one quick point I'd like to make is that marginalized groups have always had to fight for their rightful place in U.S. and California history. And without this bill, it would be an incomplete history. Thank you.
Thank you.
Isabel Garcia, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members.
Good afternoon.
Isabel Garcia, representing the California Teachers Association, asking for your support for Senate Bill 48. This bill will ensure that curricular materials adequately portray the diversity of our society and, importantly, to support and protect the human and civil rights of our students. CTA has long supported accurate portrayals of the roles and contributions of all ethnic groups, races, and cultures in all aspects of the curriculum and school policies to address the common values of our society and fundamentally to promote respect for diversity and cooperation. So for these reasons, the California Teachers Association respectfully asks for your support to pass this landmark bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Good afternoon. Elena Perez with the California National Organization for Women. This body certainly has an ability, and some opponents will doubtless say a responsibility, to declare that our schools may choose not to give our students an accurate historical education or to provide a fair and non-discriminatory learning environment. But let us not pretend that by denying our students the truth of the historical record that we are somehow protecting them, when in fact we would be doing exactly the opposite. Our schools have no business in discrimination. Their business is an education of quality and equality, and this bill will help to ensure that for all California students. We urge your aye vote.
Thank you very much. Other witnesses in support?
Jeanette Sanepatin, Legislative Staff Attorney with the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, also in strong support.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Gill, ACLU, support.
Thank you.
Madam Chair and members, Khadija Alam Javed with the Advancement Project. Very briefly, I just want to add that our state needs to adopt a zero-tolerance policy on discrimination, and that starts with teaching our kids what's the difference between right and wrong. This bill does that, and we ask for your support.
Thank you very much.
Randy Hicks with Californians for Disability Rights. We'd also like to thank the author for including disabilities as part of the curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Virginia Strawn Martin on behalf of Los Angeles Unified School Districts, one of the first districts in the nation, really, to create tolerance curriculum in our health classes specifically. We've been doing it since 2007, and evidence has shown that this curriculum actually increases tolerance on for both students who are either gay or not gay, and also increases an atmosphere of school safety for the whole campus. We're in strong support of the bill.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Brandon Tartaglia with Disability Rights California. We urge your support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Carolyn Kim with Public Advocates in support.
Thank you.
Debbie Look with California State PTA in support. Urge your aye vote.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support of SB 48?
I thought I was in line. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Lynn Fox on behalf of the California Federation of Teachers, urging your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members, Helene Meshar on behalf of the City of West Hollywood in support. Thank you.
Thank you.
We thought we were in line for support. Pam Bachilla on behalf of the San Francisco Unified School District. This is an important measure to protect our students, and we urge your support.
Thank you very much. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Again, reminder, we're going to allow 10 minutes for opposition.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman. Good afternoon, members. My name is Pablo Cibaja. I'm the Legislative Director for Capital Resource Institute, and I come in opposition to SB 48. I find it extremely refreshing to hear the previous folks testify in favor of quality education here in the state of California. Yet even the LA Times editorial board came out against SB 48 because they don't believe that this legislative body should be legislating what local school districts should be teaching. This bill seeks to inject controversial politics into California's classrooms, textbooks, and instructional material at a time, and you know the statistics, that study after study and statistic after statistic points to a battered and dysfunctional California public school system. For example, the latest State Education Performance and Reform Index indicates that 60% of states in the Union outperform California. Testing data indicates that 77% of fourth graders in the state are not proficient in reading. The average performance grade for fourth grade math and reading and eighth grade math and reading is well below proficiency. Our education reform grade in the state is a disappointing C. Yet this legislature is focusing on injecting controversial politics, not my words, but the LA Times, into the classroom, rather than teaching our children how to read, write, and even speak. This legislature is focusing on usurping a parent's role in instructing their child to respect all peoples, instead of focusing on math and science, critical subjects in a world where we are no longer competing against 50 other states, but 195 other countries. LA Progressive analyzed data relating to African American dropouts in California. The statewide average of high school dropouts is 24.2. I want you to dwell on that for a moment. 1 in every 4 of our children in this state are dropping out of high school. When they analyzed the data and took a closer look, African American students are dropping out at a 41.6% rate. Looking even closer, counties where African Americans live, such as Alameda, has a dropout rate of 37.4, Contra Costa, 42.3%, LA County, 42.3%, San Diego, 42%, San Francisco, 41.4%, and San Joaquin stands at a whopping 53.4% dropout rate among the African American community. According to Pew Hispanics, in 2008, about 41 million adults ages 20 and older had not obtained a high school diploma, or approximately 20%. In comparison, 41% of Latinos in that age demographic are high school dropouts. As a minority, as a Latino, I find those statistics absolutely repulsive. Yet this legislature is focusing on injecting controversial politics into the classroom, not my words, but the LA Times, rather than addressing the shockingly high and morally objectionable dropout rates, especially the dropout rates of minorities in this state. Amending current code according to SB 48 would prohibit material that would adversely represent groups of people based on race, ethnicity, gender, religion, nationality, and sexual orientation. Well, at the very best, race, ethnicity, gender, religion, nationality has historically played a role in some of humanity's worst crimes. For example, September 11th was a result of radical Islamic terrorism. Nazi Germany was birthed out of German nationalism, seeking to ethnic cleansing. The Hutu and Tutsi conflict in Rwanda was a result of ethnic cleansing and ethnic tensions. Those are only 3 examples of history subject to change due to SB 48's attempt to inaccurately retell history. It is unfair to task children and students, many of which are struggling with basic math, language, reading, and science skills necessary for productiveness and global competitiveness, with more politically divisive material that will not further their academic achievement. For those reasons, we stand against SB 48 and ask you, on behalf of California's children and their academic well-being, you need to prioritize, prioritize, and prioritize. Vote no on SB 48. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Ben Lopez with Traditional Values Coalition. I'll get right into the cut to the chase and to the point here, given the limited time. This bill, even though it is being portrayed as an anti-bullying bill, there were comments in the other chamber that this was an anti-bullying bill or a bill to address discrimination or those who, unfortunately, suffered at the hands of bullying, that if this would somehow combat that, but that's simply not the case. There are provisions of law that are in place that address discrimination on the characteristics already raised in this bill. Under AB 537 in 1999, Ed Code Section 220 says no person shall be subjected to discrimination on the basis of gender, sexual orientation, or any other characteristic listed in Penal Code 422.55. Another bill, AB 1785, enacted in 2000, stated the adopt policies directed toward creating a school environment in kindergarten and grades 1 through 12 that is free from discriminatory attitudes and practices and acts of hate violence. Yet again, under AB 1785, it says it is the intent of the legislature that public schools have access to supplemental materials that combat bias on the basis of gender and sexual orientation. You also have SB 777 that was signed into law, and then the argument was, the justification for the Harvey Milk Bill at the time was we needed these bills to alleviate the discrimination that is so-called being pervaded in, that is running rampant in schools, and these bills would address the issue. These bills would fix the issue. I would argue that we let the current laws on the books run their course and address these issues instead of tacking on additional laws that really will have an impact and affect cost to the public. Irregardless whether or not we adopt these provisions and incorporate them into curriculum in the 2013 cycle or any other cycle, there will nonetheless be a special cost incurred to school districts. Is the state going to pay for them, or are the locals going to be forced to pay for these textbooks? Also, California and Texas are the #1 clients of the textbook industry in this country. We no doubt control a lot of the textbooks that are sold in the other 48 states. What is going to happen with respect to these textbooks? Is there to be a special edition created just for California that can't be shopped around in the other states because they don't contain these categories and sexual lifestyles? Again, that would no doubt incur a higher cost to the people of California. It was Abraham Lincoln that prophetically said that the philosophy of classroom today would be the philosophy of government tomorrow. And that is so true. If you look at the intent of this bill clearly changes the social content standard frameworks for instructional materials. We're talking male-female roles. We're talking ethnic and cultural groups. We're talking about even such things as being mentioned when you're talking about customs and lifestyles. Of one example in the content standards, when ethnic or cultural groups are portrayed, portrayals must depict differences in customs or lifestyles, they must not rather, as undesirable. If you include these categories into this part of the code, there's only one way you can present these lifestyles, and that is as desirable. This bill is blatant promotion at its best. With that, we are against the bill and we urge a no vote.
Thank you very much. Next witness, and just for time management purposes, there's about 2 minutes left. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm Bill May with Catholics for the Common Good, an organization that promotes social justice, human rights, parent rights, children's rights. We respectfully oppose this bill. It has nothing to do with bullying, as is plain to see. If it did, as claimed by the author, before making such a sweeping change, there are so many anti-bullying bills on the laws on the statute, so many programs. There needs to be an evaluation of these programs and what's working and what's not working. Looking at the Alameda School District, for example, the majority of bullying is girl-on-girl bullying and race-on-race bullying, or racial bullying. These are all serious problems, bullying, no matter what the cause is or who the target is. And the focus of anti-bullying has to be on respecting the dignity of every person, whether you agree with the person or not. That's got to be absolutely clear. In the bill analysis, it quoted the opposition. It summed up the opposition with a quote from a church, and it was a complaint about this promoting gay history. I want to make it clear that if you look at the opponents of this, yes, there are a lot of religious organizations opposing this bill. But if you look at the arguments presented, they're secular arguments, not religious arguments. And to dismiss the opponents of this bill as a religious group would be tantamount to dismissing the civil rights movement as a Christian movement. This, as the LA Times pointed out,
I'm going to have to ask you to close because we're past the 10-minute mark here. So if you could conclude.
Sure. There's one other thing. Gender is being substituted in this. In another piece of legislation, gender is being redefined as to include gender identity, gender expression. I don't know how you include this in history and in social studies.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And from now on, we need to state your name, organization, and your position on the bill. Next witness.
My name is Lydia Gutierrez. I'm a California Teacher Association member. I'm opposing SB 48.
Thank you. Next witness.
My name is Victoria. I'm a student, and I'm opposing SB 48.
Thank you. Next witness.
My name is Alexandra. I'm a student, and I'm opposing.
Thank you. Next witness in opposition.
Is it on? Hello. Good afternoon. I am opposed. My name is Omkar Bindra, and I represent the Sikh community. Even though the Senate,
I need you to just state your name and organization, what you have done, and now I need you to just say you're opposed to the bill.
I'm opposed to this bill because
no, sir.
Because it is very poorly drafted. It is very poorly drafted.
Sir, please. I have rules here in the committee room to give equal time to people who support this bill and people to oppose the bill, and I'm asking you to cooperate with the rules. So you've had your time. I'm going to ask for the next witness, please.
My name is Jack. I am a public school student from Ventura County, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Andy, and I'm from San Ramon Valley High School in Danville, California, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you. Next witness.
My name is Elizabeth, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you. Next witness.
My name is Nicole Qatar, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Julianne, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Joelle, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you very much.
My name is Molly. I'm a public school student, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Kayla, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Hannah, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Emily, and I oppose this bill. My name is Claire, and I oppose this bill.
My name is Evan, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
I'm Karin, and I oppose this bill.
Hello, my name is Barbara, and I'm a citizen, and I strongly oppose this bill.
I'm Joseph, and I oppose this bill.
I'm Hunter. God loves everyone, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Lars, and I oppose this bill. Mark, I love you. God loves you.
I love you too.
My name is Amy. I'm a wife and mother of 3 in Carmichael, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you very much.
My name is Rachel, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Thank you.
My name is Leah, and I'm from Sacramento, and I oppose this bill, SB 48.
Thank you. Next witness.
Michael McDermott, opposed to this political thought crime law from the Democrat Party's homo-anal cop profile.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Next witness.
My name is Jackie, and in high school I was a co-president of the Gay Straight Alliance, and I adamantly oppose SB 48. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jeremy, and I'm a 5th grade teacher, and I oppose this bill, for parents should be the primary educators of their children. Thank you.
Next witness.
My name is Helen, and I'm a retired public school teacher, and I absolutely oppose SB 48.
Thank you.
Kathy from Folsom, California. I am a school teacher, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
I'm Ralph Merletti, a substitute teacher with the Twin Rivers District, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you. Next witness.
I'm Teresa West, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
I'm John Hamlin. I teach at the University of Sacramento, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you very much.
I'm Carol Hogan from the California Catholic Conference, and we oppose the bill.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, I see that we have a quorum, so if we could just establish it, if Secretary call the roll.
Brownlee?
Here.
Brownlee here. Norby?
Here.
Norby here. Amiano?
Here.
Amiano here. Buchanan?
Here.
Butler? Carter? Ing? Here. Ing here. Gaines? Morrell?
Here.
Morrell here. Wagner? Williams?
Thank you, and welcome, Mr. Morrell. You're here substituting for Ms. Haldeman, Dr. Haldeman, so we appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much. So,
Madam Chair, I'd like to move the bill.
Bill has been moved by Mr. Amiano, second by Mr. Ing. Any questions or comments from members? Mr. Amiano, then Ms. Buchanan.
Yes, happy Gay Pride, Senator, and to everyone in the audience.
Thank you, Senator.
Yes, I feel the love, I really do. Thank you so much for bringing this issue to us. I think this is an important time in our history, particularly. It's a terrible thing to be erased. It's a terrible thing to be invisible. It's a terrible thing to stand by and watch somebody tormented. If you look at harassment, as I do, many students, and I was one of them, felt so ashamed to go to school that I played hooky as much as I could and didn't have really much of a basis to explain that to my parents. In those days, and now we're talking in the 50s, in case people just think gay people just emerged in the last few years, perhaps here in the legislature, but not in the real world. I didn't feel I could go to the teachers. In fact, some of the teachers actually harassed me and other kids that they perceived to be effeminate or not with the program, so to speak. And, that did affect how much I learned, when I learned. It did affect, in the public schools, the dropout rates for kids who are harassed particularly or don't feel comfortable. The dropout rate is astronomical. I think that we had an estimate from the National Education Association that there's like about $40 million a year that's lost because there are kids who are so harassed that they don't come to school. So I applaud you for this. In many ways, this issue is tethered to other groups that are supportive of us. We had the Gay Pride floor ceremony the other day. Sorry to see people walk out on that. That to me proves why we need your bill, because education is a great weapon. And at that at that floor ceremony, the head of the African American Caucus, the head of the API Caucus, the head of the Latino Caucus stood up and spoke in solidarity with the issue at hand, which was the recognition of gay pride. I have one question for you. The opposition has mentioned the LA Times as if the editorial board took a position. Could you elucidate that for me? Because I didn't see that article.
You know, sometimes we agree with the LA Times editorial page, sometimes we don't. They wrote less than a supportive editorial. If I may, Madam
Please.
Chairman, it to me seemed minimally inconsistent in that it took no issue with the fact that this legislature put into statute the requirement for the inclusion of the role and contribution of so many different minority groups in this state. I don't remember they editorialized against those groups, and they didn't suggest we should repeal them. They just took issue with including the LGBT community. And that's their right to have that opinion, but it's certainly not one most Californians would agree with.
Show me their editorial staff, I'll show you a gay bar.
Thank you. Ms. Buchanan.
Thank you. You know, when former Republican governor of California, Earl Warren, was chair of the Supreme Court, it heard Brown versus Board of Education. And that was many years ago. And for anyone who followed the history of it, one of the things that the social worker psychologists did is they gave little African American children a white doll and a black doll and said, which do you like better? And the children inevitably said they liked the white doll better. And the reason they did is because that's how society was portrayed to them, as though it was better to be white than to be black. It makes a difference how we portray people in our textbooks. And it makes a difference in learning how people feel about themselves and their self-esteem and whether they believe they're capable. It makes a difference if we refer to black Americans or African Americans. It makes a difference if people see that people who are like them, whether it's sexuality, gender, religion, disability, ability, it makes a difference to have them portrayed accurately, fairly, and to know that there are people out there who make a tremendous difference, people to whom they should aspire. And if there's anything that should happen in our schools, it should be children feeling safe and knowing that they're valued and we care about them and that they can grow up and be whoever they want, whomever they want, and they can make a difference in this world. So I want to thank you for bringing this forward, and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you, Assemblywoman.
Thank you, Ms. Buchanan. Mr. Morrell.
Senator Leno, I have a couple of questions. I have the text of your bill right here, and I am looking for specific language that speaks to the issue of the bullying. And can you help me sort of find where that is, or do you have that bill right there and you can read some of the specific language on the anti-bullying, please?
The opposition brought up the issue of bullying. In my comments, I made reference to the same studies that Ms. Laub made reference to, which document very clearly, and these are surveys of over 2,200 students at a time, in school districts such as Los Angeles Unified and San Francisco Unified, which currently have this inclusive study for their students, that all types of bullying, not just against LGBT students, but for all types of students who are perceived as different from their classmates, everyone uniformly responded that there was less bullying in those school districts which had this kind of inclusive study. That's the relationship to the bullying issue.
Okay. And then another question, too, just if you've given consideration to, you know, I believe parents should be decision makers for their children's education. And I've only been up here for 6 months, new to politics. And I don't, you know, our state legislature, there's some fine people, as you know, but it's not instilling, we don't instill confidence in the California people right now. I understand we're at our lowest rating, but also, as I've spoken with parents and many school teachers, we rank somewhere between 48th and 50th on education. Our school budgets are a little bit tough right now, so I'm trying to figure out, I like some of the comments made about math, critical thinking, those types of things, where our kids they need the real skills to be able to compete. And then just the fact that I am concerned that lawmakers are making these moral decisions, it concerns me. Can you give me some explanation and what you were thinking? Yeah.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, with regard to the costs, as the Senate Appropriations Committee already has confirmed, there will be no cost to the state. There's a very complex and arduous task of amending and reprinting our textbooks. In fact, and the chair may correct me here, but we've even delayed the next round of printing due to our own state finances. So I think it doesn't happen until about 2014. 15-16. So, as I say, long and arduous. With this bill as statute, it would be a part of the reconsideration of the content of that which will be reprinted in 2015-16. Nothing will happen before then. Beyond that, that's with regard to what will be in the textbooks. The actual daily teaching plan will be determined at the local level where it should be. So we won't be dictating those lesson plans for local schools. That will be done by a public process that will be led by the local school boards. And I'm here to recognize that the way this bill will be manifested in your school district may be quite different from the way it's manifested in my school district. And that's the way it should be. It will be locally appropriate, age appropriate, but not unlike with African Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, European Americans, and all the other groups that are already in our education code, which are required to have their roles and contributions included in our curriculum, that we will require this addition. But again, how it is taught will vary from school district to school district and school to school.
And one last question, because it was brought up there was a quote on your bill that closed with a church, and or a statement from a church. And today, as I was thinking about this, because I was asking to pitch hit for a couple of people today, we have a couple of people gone, so I just getting up to speed on this issue, so forgive me. But I have had a number of constituents contact our office, some in support in my district, more opposed. And have you considered and help me walk through the consideration you gave in the fact that, for an example, I'm not Catholic, but this does sort of fly in opposition to 1.3 billion Catholics throughout the world. It sort of is in opposition to some of the great thinkers of the world, from not Aristotle, but Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, all the way up to our recent Pope, who just passed away a couple of years ago. And you have sort of a Bible Belt where down in the southern part of the California, which I come from. So, it does go, Judaism, it flies in sort of opposition of 5,000 years of tradition there. So that is an issue for millions of people within our state.
Mr. Morrell, you touch on a really critically important point, and I'm happy to respond. First of all, this is not a religious issue, nor should it be. And I'm very proud of the fact that the California Council of Churches, which is an umbrella organization of over 12 different Christian denominations, is in full support of this bill. So we have some religious and faith leaders and communities who are opposed. We have an equal number that are in support. But that gets to the core of your point, which is how do we, as a melting pot society, democratic society, deal with all of these different religious perspectives? And what we do in this society is that we specifically don't base any laws or public determinations on any one religion's interpretation of their particular holy book. And isn't it interesting? We fight wars around the world. We're spending billions of dollars probably every other day making sure that in other parts of this world, religious perspectives are not put into state law. I think that's why we're in Afghanistan. I think that's why we're in a number of other countries, because we want a democratic society and we don't want any one religion using their particular interpretation of their particular book put into state law. This is respectful of that. You know, the same kind of questions, the very same questions were used when the idea of very radical notion of its time was that we would have black studies in our schools, that we would actually include the history of African Americans. There were parents who said, I won't let my children go to school. I don't want them learning about that because that's not appropriate. But in our society, we treat people equally under the law, and so that, even though was opposed by some religious folks from their particular religious perspective, though respective of their perspective, we didn't let their decision-making impact what would happen in our public education. The same with this.
Thank you. Finished? Mr. Norby.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While I appreciate the author's explanation as to why we're in Afghanistan, I've never heard that explanation before, but I guess it's as good as any.
They're called Taliban. They're religious extremists, and they're trying to put
we're
their
supporting a
beliefs into
government
law.
that isn't much more tolerant either.
And I want the troops home, too.
And we're supporting a Shiite regime in Iraq, but we won't get into that. That's for Congress.
All right.
But I do have two concerns about the bill. One is process and the other is substance. On the issue of process, we've had a number of bills like that telling us what ought to be in the textbooks, and certainly textbooks are state approved, but there is a process for approving these things. And I'm very skeptical of bills that mandate certain things be taught a certain way, especially in history textbooks. And it's usually history textbooks because that's the one thing we understand. Math, science, you know, if we were geniuses at that, we probably wouldn't be here. And I've had a lot of these bills, and I've opposed all of them, so I would oppose this regardless of the substance. I opposed a bill which mandated the teaching of Ronald Reagan's presidency just because it was in honor of his 100th birthday. I felt that Reagan was already adequately covered, and it was almost patronizing to have a bill to say that. There was a bill to recognize the role of Filipinos in World War II. I mean, they were central to the war, and I didn't favor that because I thought they were already covered, and the micromanaging of subjects in the history textbooks is it's not something I think we ought to do as a legislature, because if we did, then that's probably all we'd do. So I do have a concern about that. As to the substance itself, my concern, first of all, is the need for the bill, is the assumption of the bill, and I'll throw these out and you can respond to them individually or at the end, is the assumption of the bill that there currently is discriminatory treatment in textbooks, because if that's the case, I've never seen it. I taught history for about 20 years, and I don't remember homosexuality or any sexual preference being necessarily mentioned in a discriminatory way. Or is it to point out those individuals in history who were not aware of their sexual preference, and therefore students should be, and that will somehow help their self-esteem? I'm not sure which it is or if it's both. If it's the first, I don't believe that there is discriminatory treatment. If it's the second, I'm not sure exactly how we do that. I mean, it's one thing to talk about various ethnic groups, slavery, immigration. I mean, these are distinct cultural groups that came from a certain area with a certain cultural milieu. But the issue of sexual preference and behavior is woven in. I mean, the spectrum is woven into all groups of people from everywhere. It's not necessarily an identifiable, inheritable cultural trait that would be treated the same way as other groups might be. Now, you can disagree if you want, but I'm just trying to present this as a historical perspective. I'm also concerned about trying to apply labels retroactively on people that would not have accepted those labels. I have a biography of James Buchanan in front of me, and James Buchanan was a president who was never married and who at the time was kind of known and joked about that he had a relationship with a senator from Alabama, Senator King. And these aren't, I'm not doing this for the salacious. This is a historical book, and it talks about this. And this is an historian from Goucher College, Gene H. Baker, who writes, and with the permission to read just a couple of sentences.
Permission granted.
She said, in this case, this was a period before the word homosexual had come into use and before Americans identified themselves as straight, gay, or somewhere in between. Men in Buchanan's time did not have sexual identities, but they did have sexual behaviors. And oftentimes throughout history, there have been different kinds of sexual behavior, but it didn't necessarily identify the person the way it seems to identify people now, or at least the way some embrace self-identification, either positively or others negatively. And so I'm concerned as a history teacher. I mean, James Buchanan may get one paragraph in the history book at the most, and it's going to be at the Kansas-Nebraska Act, the road to Civil War. Do I also have to add about these issues to show that, well, we may have had a gay president the way it's defined today, but he didn't necessarily call himself that. In fact, it wasn't really used at the time. If I talk about John Maynard Keynes, who was probably one of the two most influential economists of the 20th century, along with Milton Friedman, do I have to point out that he sexually preferred men and Keynes preferred women? Or I could use the word gay. Keynes wouldn't have used it because I don't think the term was really commonly used till about 1970 or so. In so doing that, am I really talking about something that's really irrelevant to his economic theories? And if anything, in a classroom full of 7th and 8th graders, am I then kind of distracting from what really ought to be his contributions as an economist? I'm not even going to touch J. Edgar Hoover and how he might fit into the LGBT situation. But even if I did, would it be a productive thing to do? And I don't say this to make fun of any of these people, but simply to try to be fair to them historically and not try to place upon them a current identity that they themselves would not have accepted. So I'm not sure where this goes with that. At the most benign, I would say it's not needed because I don't believe that current curriculum discriminates. At the most proactive, we're talking about having to go back and identify historical figures, whether they were straight, gay, bi, whatever. And I don't think that's really that productive either, because if I have to identify those that may have had sexual preferences that weren't part of the majority, then the kids are going to say, well, what about this one? Is he straight or gay? And some of these guys, I don't know, and I don't really care, and it's not relevant to what they did. And I don't want to go down there as a history teacher. Sure. So that's my concern.
Great.
And why I can't support it.
I'd like to respond,
please,
both to your process question and then to your content question. With regard to your process point, I want to say that I completely appreciate your perspective and I respect your consistency. It's not something we see a lot of here, so thank you for it. With regard to the content, I bet you were a great classroom instructor because you've really framed...
I just have a bigger classroom now.
You've really framed this issue for us perfectly. And I want to relieve anyone of the notion that what we're trying to do here is to out historical figures. That is not anything about what we're talking about. But your point could be incorporated into as brief of a 15 or 20-minute lesson for a day on the modern civil rights movement, that there were and have been LGBT people throughout history, some well known as such, some not, and how we identify in the LGBT community with our sexual orientation today is very different than it was done in other times of history. A time similar to our current time was Berlin 1928-30. That was a rare moment in European history. But going back to the 19th century and the possibility that we had a president who had affectionate relationships with one or more men is an example of how society and individuals relate to their sexual orientation in different ways throughout history. So that's a great lesson right there. And again, what we're really talking about is lifting this veil of censorship that, as Assemblyman Tom Amiano has pointed out, leaves an entire community of Californians and Americans invisible, as if we don't exist, as if we haven't existed, and as if we haven't been struggling for the great promise of the Constitution's philosophy of treating all individuals equally under the law, and that all men and women are created equally. And that's what we're trying to change here, just for more an inclusive history lesson, so that young people are not denied the facts of an entire community and their leadership. And you heard this young student, you heard Isaiah share with you that when he was a sophomore in high school, coming out as a young gay man, knowing, as he stated, that he was aware, though didn't quite have a word for it, as younger people don't. I was in the same situation when I was 5, 6, 7, 8. I knew there were attractions. I didn't have a name for it. But by the time I came into my teenage years, and as Isaiah did, but we've all experienced this lack of information denying us the opportunity to have the kind of self-respect and self-image, positive self-image, that is so part and parcel of the more general population, that isn't looked upon, perceived as being different. And that's the value of what we're trying to do here.
Mr. Ng has a question.
Thank you
Or a comment.
very much, Madam Chair. And just a couple of observations in the question. The first observation is thank you very much for the part in your bill which updates terminology, particularly with regard to Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And this shows that in the whole lexicon of education that there is a need to update language, that history does move forward. The second part relates to accurately portraying people in our textbooks. And many people think textbooks are just neutral instruments for neutral facts, but there are very, very clear omissions sometimes. I remember, and this is going to be very brief, I remember going through law school and reading case after case about civil rights and wondering why, in my own experience, where my grandfather experienced extreme discrimination, in which an entire state of California, led by a former governor, victimized and terrorized a whole group of people. And so I went to my professors and I said, why is it that Asian Americans are not found in any of the textbooks? And they hemmed and hawed and said, well, because there aren't any cases. Well, I went to the law library and I found case after case, Gong Lam versus Rice, a murder trial in which an individual was accused of murder and there was only one witness. And that witness was a Chinese immigrant in San Francisco, a place where you might be somewhat familiar with. And the defense moved for a dismissal of all charges, and the judge granted it. You don't believe it? Look it up. And the reason was very simple, because at that time, in that courtroom, in this state of California, Chinese Americans were legally classifiable in the same category as animals. It was as if you had a dog on the witness stand testifying that that dog saw a murder. And case after case after case, an ordinance passed in San Francisco where only those businesses that operated laundries out of wood frame places of business were banned. And lo and behold, the only group of individuals that lost their livelihood were Chinese-owned laundries. That instilled in me a curiosity, and I compiled a textbook of cases, a textbook larger than this book, which became the first civil rights course on Asian Americans and civil rights in the United States of America. And so I really think that it is necessary for us to make sure that facts need to be deliberated and that we're very, very careful. I'll lead with this one last example. I'm dyslexic. I can't even pronounce that word. I have trouble reading. I tend to reverse letters. And it takes me a long time to read information. That's why I'm the last person out of here at night. And I remember being in the library so often that eventually they made me a member of the library board in the city of Monterey Park. And one night, an individual came and said, "We're going to celebrate individuals that you don't read about." And there was a man whose name you all know. And this man is one of the least known Latinos in American history. This man grew up in a Latino household. His name is Walt Disney. Walt Disney is Latino. His family immigrated from Spain. And as a result of that conversation, textbooks began to be revised to reflect that. And I close with this. So I think it's very, very important that history and education is so vibrant. It's so exciting that we need to make sure that we have these exciting ideas in there and that they're fair. My last question is this. It's been brought to our attention that California has some severe challenges in terms of its expenditures on education, that we're in last place in this category, last place in that category, 50th out of 50 states. What do you say to those individuals that say, with unemployment so high and budgets being cut in schools, we can't afford to have a bill like this that teaches us about the kind of things that you mentioned? I guess it's an economic question. Maybe it's something that you can't walk while you're talking.
Well, thank you, first of all, for the history lesson, which I did not know, and I didn't know of your own accomplishment of that textbook, so congratulations on that. I'd love to see it. With regard to our chronic underfunding of schools, I think I'm well known around here as being one of those who recognizes that we have a severe revenue problem, that if we only restored the tax base that we had in this state over the second half of the 20th century, we could fully fund our schools the way we used to when they were the best in the nation. So I'm well aware, as are you, that we rank 50 out of 50 states in the number of students per nurses and counselors and librarians. We're in sorry shape. But to suggest that we don't have 15, 20 minutes to lift this veil of censorship is really unusually cruel to all of those students who are suffering so, not just those who are going home and killing themselves, but as Assemblyman Amiano pointed out, all those who are so bullied that they stay away from school. If we're really serious about doing something about our dropout rate, which I suggest that we should be concerned and do something about, we'll make sure that the classroom is welcome and inviting, not terrifying, for all students, because our student dropout rate is exacerbated by the very problem this bill is addressing. So we want to lower that dropout rate, make schools more inclusive, inviting, welcoming, and safe for everyone.
Thank you. And seeing no other members wanting to speak, I just want to thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill forward. And I must say I'm privileged today to be able to remember again a constituent of mine whose name is Lawrence King. They referred to him as Larry King, who was a young man who was shot twice in the head, as you said, for acting too effeminate or too girly, as you said. And I think when that particular middle school in Oxnard tried to unpack what had happened and how it happened, I think in terms of the how it happened and what they need to do differently, a big component piece of that had to do with education. And it also had to do with the adults in that community being very focused on creating a community in that school that recognizes diversity, respects diversity, inclusive, and the notion of being able to talk about our differences in a very safe, in a very, very safe way. So I think we're all on this dais are very clear that this bill is about California's instructional materials and their textbooks and the content of that. And as a result of our textbooks, including disabled, LGBT models and history, will change cultures in schools. And as a consequence of all of that, bullying, student attendance, student success in school will improve. And so actually a very small change can have a very large outcome for change. And so that's a very, very positive thing. And I think we all sitting in this room at this moment are experiencing a little bit of history, because many times in the fight for civil rights, it always seems like it's a long fight. And it takes forever. And when are we going to get to this moment? And it feels today that we're approaching a moment in terms of looking at a piece of policy in California that is not the whole solution, but an important piece, I think, of the solution. So I just want to thank you for bringing this bill forward, and without any...
Madam Chair, if I may just
Yes,
very
I was
briefly,
going to ask you to make your final close, and
It'll be
then
very
we will...
brief, very brief. You and your committee have been more than generous with your time, and I really appreciate it. I want to thank you for remembering the name of Lawrence King. I would also want to remember the name of Seth Walsh, whose memory is continued in the work of Assemblyman Tom Amiano and his bill. And then also, I would not want the Sikh community to feel as if it had been silenced today. I don't want to presume I knew or know what the speaker was going to say, but from other conversations I've had with members of the Sikh community prior to getting to this presentation today, I would believe that there was a message they wanted to communicate, which is, could you amend our community's history and contribution into your bill as well? I think that might have been what the message was. And so, whereas I'm not able to do that today, I think it's a very worthy concept, and I want to continue to work with the Sikh communities. I'm sure others among us would as well. So I just wanted to make sure no one's feelings were hurt.
And I'm very glad that
that
you raised that issue, and I concur wholeheartedly. We do have his correspondence here, and I hope all who testified understand that I was trying to provide equity and fairness in this discussion. So without any further comments, this item has been moved by Mr. Amiano and seconded by Mr. Ng, and the committee will take a vote, and we'll call the roll. Oh, and excuse me, the motion is do pass.
Thank you.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Norby?
No.
Norby, no. Amiano? Aye. Amiano, aye. Buchanan? Aye. Buchanan, aye. Butler? Aye. Butler, aye. Carter? Aye. Carter, aye. Ng? Aye. Ng, aye. Gaines? Morrell?
No.
Morrell, no. Wagner?
No.
Wagner, no. Williams? It has 6 votes.
Your bill has 6 votes. Your bill is out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Quickly.
Yeah, I just would like to acknowledge for the City on the Hill youth that came out. If you just stand up and thank you. In the back.
So we will move on to our next bill, which is SB 128 by Senator Lowenthal. And that is item number 3.
What's this bill about?
Thanks. Mr. Lowenthal, Senator Lowenthal has 2 bills.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Before you begin, Senator, we are going to move back to our normal rules, which is 3 witnesses on each side, roughly 2 minutes each. And please, welcome and present your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 128 does 2 things. One, it allows career technical education construction projects to be eligible for funding under the High Performance School program, and it allows modernization projects to include new green building systems. The State School Facility Modernization Program provides funding to renovate schools that are at least 25 years of age. But however, current law does not allow new green building systems to be funded under the modernization program. While new school facilities must meet certain environmental standards, our older classrooms remain ineligible for funding for some green building systems, creating inequities in our K-12 learning environments. We know that green school facilities can affect academic performance of our pupils. Daylighting, clean, well-circulated air, good acoustics can all contribute to better pupil performance. We also know that school districts can save a great deal of operational dollars through the addition of energy efficiency and energy generation systems, yet some of these building systems are not available to districts through our modernization programs. SB 128 does not add any cost to the state. The bill simply allows local flexibility for the use of existing state funding programs, and it will provide children and teachers housed in our older schools and those that are electing to go through career technical education classrooms the same healthy learning environments that are enjoyed in our new schools. And I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator. Witnesses in support.
Madam Chair, Justin Milan on behalf of the U.S. Green Building Council in California, and I could not say it more eloquently than the author, so I'll cut it short and say ditto. We urge your aye vote.
Thank you. Next witness.
Lynn Fox on behalf of the California Federation of Teachers. We think this is a good common sense measure, allows funds to be used in a new way and for modernization and makes sense for all. Thank you. Ask your aye vote.
Thank you.
Debbie Look with California State PTA, strong support in supporting the environmental health for school for our students and teachers, and also to provide a more efficient system and a better use of our public dollars.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Brian Rivas on behalf of the California School Boards Association. This will help schools incorporate high-performance characteristics into a broader range of projects. It'll provide healthier learning environments. It's good for kids, so we support the bill.
Thank you. Next witness.
Pam Bachilla on behalf of the Oakland Unified School District and the San Francisco Unified School District. Particularly proud of our success with high-performance schools in Oakland. Look forward to continuing that effort with this bill.
Very good. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, the bill has been moved. Do I have a second on this bill? Ms. Carter seconds the bill. Any comments or questions from members? Ms. Buchanan.
I have one question. When you say that the program shall allow the required local contribution to be paid over time if sufficient local funds are not immediately available, do you see the state financing the local share? That wasn't quite clear to me. So,
where, can you tell me where?
It's on page 4, H, lines 20 to 22.
I believe that's current law.
That existing law?
That's
okay.
existing law. Okay. We did not introduce that.
All modernization requires contribution.
Right. That is existing law. We did not change that.
This is on the high performance. Okay. That's all right.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I think this is a very good bill. It's really time for us to update our modernization program, I think, in California.
Absolutely.
And this is about all of our public buildings should be models for the rest of the buildings in California, and so certainly we should be doing that with our schools. And so I really thank you for bringing the bill forward. And if you would like to close.
I would like to just echo the words of the chair of the committee, and I urge your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator. And the motion is due pass to the Assembly Appropriations Committee and moved by Mr. Ng and seconded by Ms. Carter. Secretary, call the roll.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Norby? Amiano?
Aye.
Amiano, aye. Buchanan?
Aye.
Buchanan, aye. Butler? Butler, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ng?
Aye.
Ng, aye. Gaines? Morrell? Wagner? Williams? It has 6 votes.
The bill has 6 votes. Your bill is out.
Thank you.
And then we will move to your second bill, SB 827, which is item 20 on our agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. SB 827 is a modest, but it's an important measure that creates a 23-member advisory committee to provide the legislature and the governor with recommendations on the future of CalPADS. You know, CalPADS is the California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System. This advisory committee would be public with varied representation, including parents, teachers, school administrators. Committee would be charged with advising us on the ability of the state's CalPADS system to serve local, state, and federal public data needs, as well as compliance that needs, as well as the necessary steps to expand CalPADS as part of a more comprehensive data system. The legislature, by establishing CalPADS, has determined a fundamental need for a longitudinal student data system and has invested its limited available federal funds towards that end. There has been no opposition to this bill, and I respectfully request an aye vote.
Thank you, Senator. Witnesses in support.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. Chris Reef on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Torlakson. The Superintendent is a sponsor of this measure and is very much asking for the committee support. As you know, last October, then Governor Schwarzenegger vetoed the operational funding for CalPADS, which dealt a significant blow to the operation and implementation of the final stages of CalPADS. The state has made a significant investment over the last 8 years for full implementation of the state's educational data system. And I will emphasize that this is the backbone of the state's educational data system. And as a result, dealt a significant blow to the finalization. As a result, the current Governor, Jerry Brown, quickly put together an advisory committee that helped advise the legislature as well as the governor on the reinstitution of that money, which was done. That money was federal dollars, and I'll emphasize the federal aspect because there are federal requirements and federal data elements that are required for us to meet and comply with not only with ESEA requirements, but also in terms of Recovery Act dollars as well. And this advisory committee will be ongoing and will provide ongoing advice and assistance to the legislature and the budget in making those recommendations on the operations of CalPADS in the near future. I was hoping actually that some of the Republican members would have remained because I know there may have been some concerns in terms of the perception of an increase in size of government in relation to the CalPADS advisory committee. I do want to speak to that specifically, and there is actually currently a CalPADS advisory committee in the statute that is currently defunct. This particular good advisory committee that is proposed in 827 would replace that with a much more established and invested advisory committee appointed by the Assembly, by the Senate, and by the Governor's Office, so that it includes a very inclusive stakeholders work group so that we ensure that CalPADS continues to meet the rigorous and expected data needs of the state's educational system. So strongly ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Sherry Griffith with the Association of California School Administrators. We're in support of the measure and appreciate the Senator's inclusion of school administrators. As many of you know, it's our members that have to implement this system, and while we have faced many challenges, we think it's very important to move forward in a formal fashion to really address an area that we think needs to be addressed and has actually been lacking, and that is really how this data can support local teaching and learning. There's been a great emphasis on compliance, reporting data to the state, but we think that we really need to have a dialogue about how this truly supports local districts, including the need for ongoing training, support for infrastructure and development, and really the information going back and forth between districts. There's a lot of work to do, and we support moving that forward.
Thank you. Next witness.
Erica Hoffman on behalf of the California School Boards Association. I'll just make it very brief for all the reasons mentioned. We are very much in support of this measure and would urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Thank you. Brad Strong with Children Now. In 2008, we worked for similar provisions in SB 1298, and those were removed in favor of working groups. These provisions are long overdue, and it's more timely now than ever. I would respectfully suggest consideration be given to the potential for an urgency. The recommendations will be provided to the legislature within a year and a half, and obviously that work is extremely timely. So the more that can be done to expedite it, the better. And also that the scope of the conversation within the advisory committee might want to extend beyond CalPADS and to the comprehensive statewide data system. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Melissa San Miguel on behalf of the Education Trust West, and we're in support of the bill. There have been much talk on CalPADS in previous committees and budget subcommittees, and we would just like to point out that CalPADS, as it stands now, has proven quite valuable. It has given us a true dropout rate and in the coming weeks will give us a true graduation rate. We look forward to the discussion the advisory committee will have on how the system may be strengthened to better support parents, districts, and students, and as well how we can move from seeing CalPADS as simply an inputs and data depository to envisioning it as an outputs system that can support student instruction and learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Katie Valenzuela with Public Advocates in support of the bill, and we'd just like to thank the Senator for moving the discussion forward and for the inclusion of parents on the advisory committee.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support?
Patty Scripter, California State PTA support.
Great. Other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, is there a motion on the bill? Ms. Buchanan. Yes, please, go ahead.
And I do support what you want to do, because I think it'll be a big step, and hopefully not just moving it forward, but involving all the stakeholders will have a more meaningful process. I do have two comments, because you outline that the 6 members are appointed by the superintendent, or 7 members by the superintendent, 6 by the state board, 4 by the assembly, 4 by the Senate, and then you talk about the groups the stakeholders need to, that this commission need to represent. But it's not clear to me how you ensure, if someone isn't appointed from a particular group, it's not clear to me who would be responsible for making sure we appointed the parents or teachers and who that falls to.
Right.
And my other just comment for you to think about, I don't know if it's where it goes from here, is that CalPADS is supposed to address preschool through college, and there's nothing in here that specifically requires a preschool rep or a higher ed rep. And so I would like you to consider, and I'm happy to move the bill, but consider whether or not there should be some kind of requirement in there.
Why don't we start with the first and ask the representative from the SPI how we're going to get that representation built into that, and then I'll address the second part, the preschool through college.
Certainly. In a current statute, there are many advisory committees and commissions established, and in those statutes there are continuously references to the intent of the legislature that the committees represent diverse, inclusive stakeholder groups, and certainly in this measure, this is an active statute and would be appointed as such. Absent specifying what body appoints what individual, this statute would be extremely clear in the appointing and to the appointing bodies on who should be included in the committee. And I'm happy to have the conversation with you in the near future if those concerns aren't acutely addressed in the current language.
I'm just saying, when if you have the governor makes all the appointments and then the legislature each has a rep, that the governor would have responsibility for making sure that the appointments included people from each of those groups. It's just, I understand that this happens with other bills, but if you don't have a rep representing a parent, who then is responsible for that? So that's
I think it's very important. I had not thought of how that would be. I will work with you to make sure that that's included without specifying that the assembly has to appoint a parent and the.
Yeah, I don't know who it is, but
I don't know either.
We need some mechanism.
I think it's. We've heard already that much of the support is from the stakeholders because they feel, and then to have them left out or not, or not to be included right from the beginning or to be the last one because it was the only one that was left out would not be my intention. And so,
I never questioned that it was. I just was.
And I also think, although we have not talked about preschool and that, but I would like to work with you on that also. I think there are issues, as you're right. Although we have focused on really trying to figure out as our phase 1, phase 2 of the CalPAD system, how we're going to use the data for both compliance at the state and federal, but even more than that, how we're going to use this to guide much of our student learning and the issues back to the local LEAs in terms of how this data can be used. I think that we need to address also the issues of preschool and also higher education. And I will work on that as it moves forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? See none. Is there a motion? Moved by Mr. Amiano. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Buchanan. And again, Senator, I think this is a very important bill. I think we're at a critical crossroads.
That's right.
If you will. We have invested a lot into CalPADS, and now it's really important that we are able to utilize it and get our bang for the buck, so to speak, and help. I mean, the data is collected for all good reasons, to help us inform ourselves in terms of good policy, inform teachers in terms of instruction, and it's critical that we take advantage of this great investment that we've made. And so I think this advisory committee will get us to that point. And so thank you. And if you'd like to close.
Again, I just echo the sentiments and the thoughts of the chair.
All right. Well,
and I urge an aye vote. The chair did
there
not
you
say
go.
that.
So the motion is due pass to the Appropriations Committee and moved by Mr. Amiano and seconded by Ms. Buchanan. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Norby? Amiano? Buchanan? Aye. Buchanan, aye. Butler? Butler, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ing? Aye. Ing, aye. Gaines? Morrell? Wagner? Williams?
5 votes, so we will keep this item on call.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you. So our next item is Senator Liu, SB 779, item 18 on our agenda. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you.
Please.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Let me start by taking the committee's suggested amendments on page 2 of the analysis. This bill authorizes school districts to provide instruction on financial literacy to its students. California is way behind the other states in our union. Many states have various financial literacy laws. 15 states actually mandate it in their high school curriculum. Currently, California has 0 laws related to financial literacy. This takes a small step forward. I have witnesses here in support and would respectfully request an aye vote.
Thank you. Please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. Alex Alanis with the California Bankers Association. We commend Senator Liu for his dedication on this issue, supported his efforts in the past to emphasize financial literacy and money management in the schools. We believe it's very important at an early age for students to understand money management skills. We think it makes them better consumers of financial service products. And with that, that's the reason why we support the bill. Thanks.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Patty Salazar on behalf of the California Credit Union League. As advocates for financial literacy, we are proud to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sherry Griffith with the Association of California School Administrators. We are in support of the measure and feel that it will be a very good fit with our economics curriculum in the state of California, particularly at the secondary level. Thank you.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, is there questions, comments from members? Mr. Ing.
Well, Mr. Liu, or Senator Liu, I want to commend you for your perseverance, and I hope that this time it goes through and is signed by the governor. This is such an important issue, and it's, we just entertained a meeting and a book signing by the gentleman that was our former treasurer, who was on the commission that identified the causes of the meltdown. And one of the reasons, obviously, is because we don't understand what we sign, from adults to young people. And I think this bill will go a long way toward at least focusing attention on that need. And I commend you, and I intend to vote aye on your bill.
Great. Thank you.
No, we need a motion.
Move the bill.
It's moved by Ms. Buchanan, seconded by Mr. Ing. Any other comments, questions? The motion is due pass as amended to the Appropriations Committee. Mr. Liu, you have been a champion on this issue, and I think it's critically important to be part of the curriculum in our schools. And so thank you for bringing this forward. And if you have a close, it would be now.
So if anyone's watching, the single most important 2 words you can remember from this is compound interest. Respectfully request that I vote.
Thank you, Senator. Secretary, call the roll.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Norby? Amiano?
Aye.
Amiano, aye. Buchanan? Aye. Buchanan, aye. Butler? Butler, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ing? Aye. Ing, aye. Gaines? Morrell? Wagner? Williams?
6 votes. 6 votes. Your bill is out.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we will move to Ms. Hancock, SB 300, item 4. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and committee members. Let me begin by accepting the committee recommendation to reinstate the Academic Content Standards Commission in SB 300. However, I'd like to request the opportunity to work with your staff to reduce the suggested 13-member commission to 9 members in an effort to be cost-conscious on this. I have to tell you that we originally had something like this. It was taken out in Senate appropriations, and hopefully we would be able to do 9 members. If it came down to doing nothing or doing something more truncated, I think that the worst outcome really is to do nothing, because we could end up with science standards and history, social studies standards that would be so terribly outdated. But by all means, let's give it a try.
And we recognize that issue, and as long as you're going to be working closely with the committee staff on that, we certainly welcome it. Our intention here is just to make sure that we have the very best bill possible. So,
right. And
I understand the next hurdle, however. So.
Yes, right. So thank you so much. Just, this bill sets up a process for updating the K-12 science standards and frameworks, and to complete the work that was really almost completed for the history social studies standards that was cut short due to budget considerations last year. To cut to the chase, we have science standards that don't even talk about nanotechnology or biotechnology or many of the things that our young people need to know and understand in order to be ready for more advanced work and for solid jobs in the global economy. And similarly, our understanding of history changes and is focused differently over time, and those standards are almost ready for being sent out for adoption. It's a matter of doing the public comment period and sending it on to the state board.
I move the bill.
Bill's been moved. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Carter. Please proceed.
I was simply going to say that we're sponsored by the California Science Teachers Association, and with me today is Christine Bertrand of the California Science Teachers Association and others in support.
Welcome. First witness in support.
Thank you very much. I am Christine Bertrand with California Science Teachers Association. As we've mentioned before, the science standards are now over 13 years old, and there is no process or nothing in law that would require them ever to be updated. So we think not only is it long past due for there to be such a process put into place, but we have a fear that once the reinstatement of the adoption of instructional materials is reinstated, we're still going to be dealing with standards that were developed in 1998, and we really think it's an unconscionable situation that California, of all states, should be teaching science that is that old. So we're really just requesting that a process be put in place to review the science standards at this time. Thank you, and we urge your aye vote.
Thank you. Next witness.
Hi, Bob Lucas on behalf of Business for Science, Math, and Related Technologies Education, or Be Smart as we like to call it. There's an obvious need to update the science standards. There's an obvious need for a process in order to do so. We think there's a need for this bill, and we urge an aye vote.
Thank you.
Debbie Look with California State PTA. We'd like to thank Senator Hancock for bringing this forward. We strongly support the need for our students to have access to the best quality curriculum possible, and so feel this is an important step in that direction.
Thank you. Next witness in support.
Honorable Chair and members of the committee. Honorable Chair and members of the committee. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, that button was not there. Honorable Chair and members of the committee, the Sikh word does not exist either in the content standards or in the curriculum framework. And so much work has been done towards the curriculum framework adoption that it appears very, very unwise, I think, not to go ahead and complete this. And we, the Sikh community, very much appreciate that on 13th of April, American Sikh Day was celebrated. Some of you wore turbans. And then the last November was celebrated as Sikh Awareness and Appreciation Month. And also last year, some 15 senators and 33 assemblymen signed a letter in support of the candidature of Dalip Singh Sond, the first Asian congressman, for being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Now, we certainly appreciate all those, but how about the students? The students are not going to learn anything about the Sikhs unless we get it into the textbooks eventually, and the first step towards that is approval of the curriculum framework and approval of the content standards. Since these jobs are being taken up in this bill, I strongly support this bill.
Next witness.
Lynn Fox on behalf of the California Federation of Teachers. Simply, it's time. We ask your I vote.
Thank you.
Erica Hoffman on behalf of the California School Boards Association. I'll just ditto that comment.
Sherry Griffith with the Association of California School Administrators. Since we're talking about history, the last history textbooks in California were adopted in 1999. Those textbooks today cover the Reagan presidency, and that's as far as those books go. We strongly support this measure.
Thank you. Next witness.
Fred Jones, California Council for the Social Studies, in strong support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness in support.
Chris Reef on behalf of State Superintendent of Public Instruction Tom Torlakson.
Ooh.
Thinking of history.
Job killer.
I am not going to live that one down. The superintendent does not have an official... does not have an official position, but certainly urges the committee to move the bill forward. I'm going to go hide.
Yeah. Any other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? See none. Questions comments from members? The bill has been moved and has a second. It's a great bill. We agree with you wholeheartedly. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And would you like to close, Senator?
I would ask for your I vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, the motion is due pass as amended to the Appropriations Committee. And I will ask the Secretary to, Mr. Norby.
Help me with this.
You're ruining my rhythm. We had a rhythm going. Go ahead.
Okay, it's called democracy, dissent, and toleration, I guess. Okay. 2015 is when we're going to adopt new textbooks. That's my understanding because of the budget. So that's 4 years away, and I'm just wondering if this is premature to do something we can't do for long. We're not going to do for quite a while anyway. Those are my concerns about it. So I'll lay those at the author.
Well, I think the senator has closed, and we are prepared to vote, and hopefully maybe you can have a sidebar conversation with the senator. So with that, I'll ask the secretary to call the roll.
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Norby?
No.
Norby, no. Amiano? Aye. Amiano, aye. Buchanan? Buchanan, aye. Butler? Butler, aye. Carter? Carter, aye. Ng? Gaines? Morrell? Wagner? Williams?
Has 5 votes.
5 votes will keep the bill on call.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next author is Senator Correa. Is he here? I don't see him. So we will move to Mr. Hernandez. No? Mr. Price. Mr. Price. Mr. Price has two bills before the committee. The first one, SB 509, item 12.
509.
509. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. Senate Bill 509 addresses a major issue facing California public education today, particularly in our state's lowest achieving schools. This bill is sponsored by the California Association of African American School Administrators in an effort to address some of the constraints currently in place as it relates to the purchase of textbooks and other instructional materials. While many education experts recognize that purchasing current educational materials is key to improving educational outcomes, California school districts are currently prohibited from purchasing instructional materials from the most recent adoption unless they are purchased for each pupil within the district. This approach is not feasible for most districts. A recent LAO survey showed that schools are relying heavily on flexible funding and shifting money away from purchasing new instructional materials. SB 509 gives school districts the flexibility to purchase instructional materials for students in the lowest achieving schools, ranked in the decimals of 1 through 3 of the base academic performance index for any one of the past 3 years prior to purchasing for the remainder of the district. Members, many students in our lowest performing schools are currently using 2002 reading materials, and it will be another 5 to 7 years before new materials are adopted. That would mean no new reading programs until 2018, and students will be forced to use outdated materials that are nearly 16 years old. Finally, let me say that the bill does not require schools to make new purchases at this time, nor does it violate the spirit and the implementation of the Williams Settlement, which requires that all students in each grade level have a complete set of standards aligned instructional materials for the 4 core subjects of reading, math, science, and social studies. Dwight Bonds, Executive Director of CASA, as well as CASA board members Charlie May Knight, are here today to testify in support. Actually, we've got more members.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. Again, my name is Dwight Bonds. I'm the Executive Secretary of the California Association of African American Superintendents and Administrators. And this organization identifies programs and services to help address the education needs of African American students as well as underserved students. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker and presenter, Dr. Charlie May Knight, a former superintendent and consultant to CASA.
Thank you. Welcome.
Madam Chairperson and members of the Education Committee, Senator Price has clearly delineated the contents of our letter in support that we submitted to the Honorable Julia Brownlee on June 14, 2010, and we are in strong support of this bill and was quite concerned when in 2009 the legislature and the governor repealed the law requiring districts to purchase up-to-date educational materials. And this bill will allow school districts to provide up-to-date education materials. The ones that we are using now were adopted in 2002, and the 2008 adoption included several elements that would certainly, we think, improve our ability to close the achievement gap. The 2008 materials consist of digital and electrical format, reading intervention kits for teachers, tools for new teachers, and others. And we strongly support the passing of this bill.
Thank you, ma'am. Next witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Michael Dennis, and I'm a member of the Education and Civil Rights Committee, and I'm also a current principal, and I am here to strongly support this bill because it gives the schools the flexibility to do targeted instruction.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support?
Fred Main on behalf of the Association of American Publishers in support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? witnesses in opposition?
Madam Chair and members, Sherry Griffith with the Association of California School Administrators. First, we want to express our support for the intent of the measure, and we very much appreciate the Senator's interest in providing us flexibility in regards to purchases. And we do indeed support the idea of purchasing for decile 1 through 3 from the new adoptions. We think that's an excellent way to go. Where we have a problem with the measure is actually very technical. If you look at the intent of the legislature under this statute, the intention is that when you purchase from a recent adoption, you purchase for all schools. That language, if you look on page 2 of the bill, lines 9 through 13, the language that we have problems with still indicate that once you buy for the decile 1 through 3, it is prior to purchasing for all remaining schools. What we're asking for, and we've been working with the Senator's office, is an amendment that just drops that additional schools section and allows that district to purchase for the decile 1 through 3 with no requirement that they're expected to purchase for the other schools. And with that type of amendment, we could then remove our opposition.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? Hearing none. Questions? Ms. Buchanan.
Yeah, I sat down with AXA today because I actually have had superintendents in the districts I represent ask for this kind of flexibility because they'll have program improvement schools and they want to do all they can to help those schools. And if you require them to purchase textbooks for the entire district, then they lose the flexibility, and then you get into do we lay off teachers and have teachers in the classroom, or do we purchase the textbooks? So I just want to ask. I mean, I don't necessarily interpret the language the same way that AXA does, but is there any harm in either dropping the prior to purchasing material so you don't have a textbook publisher say you have to purchase all the rest of them, because we don't know if flexibility is going to go away tomorrow, a year from tomorrow, or 2 or 3 years from tomorrow, or just changing the words. It might say prior to entering into a voluntary agreement to purchase. I mean, so you clearly delineate. I can enter an agreement with the textbook publisher to purchase books for these schools, but it does not in any way require or assume that I have to enter into an agreement at any specific time to purchase the books for the rest, because I think that's their concern. And like I said, even though I don't read it that way, I can't see in any way if there were some kind of language we could come up with where that would take away from the intent and what you want to accomplish, because I think your bill is right on in terms of what you want to accomplish.
I think our concern here was giving the school district the authority to purchase books for the neediest children, right, and allowing the districts to also define who the neediest children
right.
are.
And I agree with that, 100% in agreement with you there.
But to suggest that we go back to the Williams requirement.
No, I'm not suggesting that.
And their requirement was that if you purchase books, you must purchase for the entire school district.
Right.
We're just simply asking that we be allowed to, or the discretion, right, to identify the neediest schools and provide that information.
Right. And I agree with you 100%. And I think based on the conversation I had with Sherry earlier, AXA agrees with you for 100%.
We very much do.
They just do not want the textbook publisher saying, you have to, saying, okay, this agreement to buy whatever, third grade reading books or whatever, you can buy them for these schools and this decile or what program improvement, and then having them come back to them a year later and say, now you have to pay for them for all the other schools that aren't in those deciles or program improvement, even though the district may continue to need that flexibility to keep certain programs going, keep libraries open. So the question is there any room at all to sit down and extend the discussion there? Because I think everyone is in complete agreement with what you want to do. And like I said, even though I don't read it this way. If someone else does, I don't know what happens when you go to court.
Yeah, no, I think we certainly are willing to have that discussion. We don't want to violate the spirit or the intent of the Williams Act, and so I'm speaking for the proponents. Certainly willing to sit down and have a continued conversation and see how we can fine tune it.
Yeah, because I think everyone. I mean, I'm
not sure.
willing to, and I'm willing to.
Where does we go to appropriates from here? Where does it refer to? To pass?
All right, and I'm willing to move the motion. I would just ask that you maybe sit down and see if there's some kind of language so a district doesn't end up having to spend $500,000 on textbooks a year later when they need that flexibility. Maybe they need to buy them for the rest of the school 2 years later. So I think they just want to be sure they don't end up in some kind of a.
Well, we certainly will have that conversation with the opposition and to work something out amicable.
As the publishers go, I mean, in terms of writing contracts for school districts, do you have some kind of requirement that one must buy all for one for all at the same time, or can you purchase them incrementally over time?
You can, well, under the current status of the law under Williams, you're basically buying for the whole school district for all schools, and that's the challenge of the bill. And so I think if the language is worked out to be consistent with Williams and the original signatories to that, we can certainly come up with something that solves the problem.
And I wanted to mention, too, our recommended amendment would address that to ensure that you are still in compliance with Williams. And under the sufficiency requirements of 60119, the materials need to be standards aligned. This would give us additional flexibility to buy from the newer list without having, as the Assemblywoman said, buy throughout the district. If we could address that, we're perfectly on board with the measure.
We were just simply asking that we use the 2008 adoption. So they've already been adopted by the state, and there's no way to comply with the Williams Amendment and give discretion to school administrators to identify the neediest children and provide for them, not at the expense of others. It appears that if all the other schools are making their API score, then there's no need to address that, but it gives the superintendent some flexibility. Right. So I don't see how we can both satisfy the Williams Amendment unless it is modified. And that's what the bill is asking for.
Well, I agree with the intent of the bill. I want superintendents to have the flexibility to buy books for the neediest schools without having to incur a major expense for all, because clearly if you have one school that's 600 API and another one that's 850, you need to pay attention to business and take care of the school that has the 600 API. So I want to accomplish it all. Like I said, I just moved the bill. I just want to make sure that you at least have.
I pledge to have that conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we are all in agreement in terms of what you're trying to accomplish here, and it's this technical language and people's different interpretation of the language. But I think clearly what you're trying to do here is to prioritize the distribution of textbooks to the kids who need it the most, and so that they're first in priority as opposed to everyone getting it at an equal time if there's limited resources. So I think we understand that, and Ms. Buchanan has moved the bill. Is there a second on the bill? Mr. Armiano seconds the bill. Are there any further questions from members? Senator Price, would you like to close?
I just appreciate the committee support. I think it's a responsible, reasonable way to provide some flexibility to those schools who need the most, and I ask for your aye vote.
Okay, and I heard you commit to continue to work with ACSA.
Absolutely.
There's still time between now and the floor, so
absolutely.
And yeah, and my staff is reminding me and recommending I concur that we would reserve the right to bring it back.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the guidance from staff and their cooperation working with us. We appreciate that.
Great, excellent. So the bill was moved by Ms. Buchanan and seconded by Mr. Armiano. It's a do pass motion. Will the secretary call the roll?
Brownlee?
Aye.
Brownlee, aye. Norby?
Aye.
Norby, I. Amiano. Amiano, I. Buchanan. Buchanan, I. Butler. Butler, I. Carter. Carter, I. Ing. Gaines. Morrell. Wagner. Williams. Williams, I. 7 votes.
7 votes. That bill is out, and so we will move to SB 512, which is item 13 on the agenda.
Madam Chair,
Please
512.
proceed. 512.
Thank you. Members, I'd like to begin by accepting as authors' amendments the staff recommendations as outlined on pages 3 and 4 of the analysis. These amendments would conform the provisions of the bill to current API reporting practices by requiring an asterisk indicating less statistical certainty for subgroups with API scores based on less than 100 pupils. SB 512 would allow for student subgroup data to be collected for subgroups with 10 or more students with a valid test score for reporting purposes only, and would not change federal or state API or AYP accountability calculations. This reporting would be in accordance with the Federal Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Current law for API accountability purposes defines a numerically significant subgroup as one having at least 50 pupils with a valid score and comprising at least 15% of the total school population. If the subgroup does not constitute 15% of the total population with valid test scores, the subgroup must be comprised of at least 100 students with valid test scores. Using that same definition for reporting purposes creates the potential for many student subgroups' academic performance to be virtually invisible if they're not considered numerically significant. In fact, according to a recent report by the African American Advisory Committee to the State Board of Education, there were roughly 15,000 African American students in California public schools whose academic performance was not considered or monitored as a subgroup under the current accountability and reporting system because they were enrolled in schools where they constituted less than 50 in number or less than 15% of the school population. 512 intends to increase the transparency and visibility of some of the most vulnerable students who may be facing very significant challenges in our public schools, yet may be hidden in school-wide data under our current API reporting guidelines. While the statistical integrity of research is something that I recognize as being very important, I believe that by not reporting the academic performance of these children, it may send a message that these students aren't as important to the larger subgroups simply because they are too few in number. In order to most effectively target the students who may be in need of specialized attention, we need to first have access to the data that will inform us of how these students are doing so that we can identify ways to help them. Otherwise, we may have no idea whether these smaller subgroups are reaching grade level proficiency or dropping out or failing to graduate from high school or just aren't getting the resources that they might need in order to be successful in school. This bill seeks to mirror, more or less, the federal adequate yearly progress guidelines for the reporting of subgroup results, which is defined as 11 or more students. California has already determined 11 as a reliable number of students to protect confidentiality concerns. SB 12 would simply create guidelines consistent with this already in place at the federal level. Members, 38 other states have subgroups of 11 or more for reporting purposes, and with 10 being the most common number. Our state has to catch up and should not only be consistent with other states, but be a leader and a champion of being responsive to our students' needs. Senate Bill 512 is a step in that direction to ensure that no child is left behind, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote. I have several witnesses here today who are prepared to testify in support of this legislation.
Thank you, Senator. First witness, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and also members. My name is Steve Wenlock. I'm with the Sacramento County Office of Education. I'm also the chair of the African American Advisory for the State Board of Education. And we want to underscore Senator Price's focus around this. The State Board appointed us to look at the issues around the achievement gap for African American students. Our word is transparency. How do we make sure that we're not leaving any child behind? We also look at the piece about what does this mean in the operation at school sites. As Senator Price said, that unless it's a significant group, it will not be held in their data as far as their accountability. Yet at the same time, our concern is making sure that our students, again, 11 to 49, as we look at, are not left behind in the sense about what the work is at the school site. Being a former principal, also associate superintendent at Elk Grove School District, I know that the work then, really what we're held accountable for, in the sense about what the data shows, will focus the interactions, the work at the school sites, looking at the kinds of things that need to support our students. And again, so we